Welcome to your deep dive. Today, we're going to tackle, I think, something we all kind of struggle with. It's how to deal with obstacles. And you've provided us with some really interesting sources, excerpts from a book, quotes from historical figures, all kind of offering different perspectives on turning, adversity into advantage.
Yeah, and what's striking is how these sources, even though they're from different eras, different disciplines, they all converge on some pretty powerful common themes.
Hmm.
It's almost like they're revealing this timeless roadmap for navigating life's, inevitable challenges.
Okay, a roadmap. I like that. So where does this roadmap begin? What's
Yeah.
the first step towards flipping this obstacle upside down, as one of the sources put it?
Well, it seems that accepting the reality of obstacles is key.
Okay.
It's a concept that's, deeply embedded in Stoic philosophy, recognizing that some things are just beyond our control.
Right.
So rather than wasting energy fighting the inevitable, you shift your focus to what you can influence, your actions, your reactions.
Yeah. It's like when you're stuck in traffic, right? Like getting frustrated at the red light is not going to make it turn green any faster.
Exactly.
But acceptance doesn't mean passivity. It's about choosing where to direct your energy effectively.
Precisely. And that brings us to a particularly intriguing concept from the Stoics. Premeditatio malorum, the premeditation of evils.
Okay, now that sounds a bit intense. Are we talking about like sitting around and imagining all the worst case scenarios?
Right.
That doesn't sound very uplifting.
No, it's not about dwelling on negativity. It's more like a mental preparation. Imagine a gymnast mentally rehearsing their routine before a competition.
Okay, yeah.
They're visualizing those potential missteps, not to scare themselves, but to be ready to adjust if things go wrong during the actual performance.
Right.
So similarly, premeditatio malorum helps us to anticipate challenges. We can rehearse our responses, and we can build resilience.
So it's almost like a mental fire drill. Not to make you afraid of fire, but to make sure that you know exactly what to do if the alarm goes off. And, thinking back to the sources you mentioned, a modern parallel to this ancient practice, the pre-mortem technique used in business.
Absolutely. It's where teams, before launching a project, hold a meeting, and they assume the project has failed.
Oh, wow.
And then they work backwards. They identify all those potential points of failure.
Okay.
So it allows them to address any weaknesses, proactively turning potential stumbling blocks into opportunities for improvement.
So the takeaway here is to shift from fearing the unknown to anticipating it, even embracing it, using the obstacle as information, a way to guide our actions and make us more adaptable.
That's a fantastic way to put it. And this preparedness leads to another crucial element that was highlighted in the sources, the development of what the Stoics called an inner citadel.
Ooh, inner citadel. I like the sound of that. It evokes this sense of strength, of being able to withstand anything, but I'm guessing it's not something we're born with, right?
Exactly. It's something that we actively cultivate, much like physical strength. The sources offered a pretty compelling example. Theodore Roosevelt. As a child, he struggled with really severe asthma.
Oh, wow.
But his father really encouraged him to overcome this through rigorous physical training.
Mm.
And this built not only his body, but also his resilience. And that foundation of strength helped him navigate countless challenges throughout his life, political battles, expeditions in the wilderness.
It's fascinating how overcoming that initial obstacle, his physical limitations, became the catalyst for building this inner citadel, this unyielding core that allowed him to face any challenge head on.
Precisely. And the sources suggest several different ways to build our own inner citadel.
Mm.
We touched on physical exercise, but it also encompasses mental discipline, things like practicing mindfulness and finding strength in something larger than yourself, a purpose or cause that fuels our resilience.
So it's about developing ourselves on multiple levels,
Yeah.
physical, mental, even spiritual. It reminds me of that quote about how an arch gets stronger by having weight placed upon it.
Right.
The challenges we face, if approached correctly, can actually make us more robust.
Absolutely. And that brings us to another really powerful concept from the sources. Amor fati, or love of fate.
Now, we talked about this earlier with the examples of Thomas Edison and Jack Johnson, right? Like finding the good in the bad,
Exactly.
using adversity to fuel growth. But I got to admit, it still feels a bit paradoxical.
Yeah.
How can we possibly love everything that happens, especially the painful or the difficult things?
Yeah, it's not about enjoying suffering or pretending that everything is perfect.
Right.
It's about a much deeper acceptance. Recognizing that even the most difficult experiences are woven into the fabric of our lives and ultimately shape who we become. And the sources suggest that this acceptance, rather than resignation, can be a source of profound strength.
So instead of resisting or denying those difficult parts of life, amor fati is about finding a way to integrate them, to learn from them, and maybe even find meaning or purpose within them.
Yes. And it ties right back to that idea of flipping the obstacle upside down. Instead of seeing challenges as purely negative events, we can choose to see them as opportunities for growth, for learning, and even transformation.
So it's not about wishing things were different, but about embracing what is and finding a way to make it work for you. It's about choosing our response, even if we can't always choose what happens to us.
Beautifully said. And that brings us to another crucial element in this roadmap, the power of perseverance. And this isn't just about gritting your teeth and pushing through. It's about understanding the difference between persistence and perseverance, as highlighted in the sources.
Yeah. Persistence is about tackling a specific problem relentlessly until you find a solution. But perseverance, that's something much bigger. It's about that long-term vision, the unwavering commitment to a goal, even when faced with setbacks or delays. It's about staying the course, even when that journey gets really tough.
Precisely. It's like the story of Odysseus.
Yeah.
Right. And his 10-year journey home after the Trojan War. He encountered countless obstacles, storms, mythical creatures, even temptations that could have led him astray. But he never lost sight of his ultimate goal, returning to Ithaca. That level of commitment, that unwavering focus.
That makes me think of that line from Tennyson. To strive, to seek, to find, and not to yield.
Yes.
It perfectly captures that essence of perseverance. And you even had a wonderfully descriptive German word for it, Sitzfleisch, literally sitting flesh. I love that. It just conjures this image of someone so dedicated, so determined, that they're willing to sit through any discomfort, any obstacle, until they achieve their goal.
That's a powerful image. And it reminds us that perseverance isn't always glamorous. It often involves those unglamorous moments of simply showing up and putting in the work, day after day, even when progress seems slow or maybe even invisible.
So we've got accepting what we can't control, mentally preparing for those challenges, building our inner strength, loving our fate, and persevering. What else does this roadmap have in store for us?
Well, the sources then point to the importance of finding strength in something larger than ourselves.
Okay.
It's about connecting to a purpose or a mission that transcends our personal worries and fears.
That makes me think about the story of James Stockdale, the highest-ranking Navy POW in North Vietnam.
Right.
He endured years of captivity and torture, but he found strength in leading and supporting his fellow prisoners. His focus shifted from "what about me" to "what about us?" And that made all the difference.
And his motto, unity over self, perfectly encapsulates this idea, and we see it echoed in other examples from the sources, like Henry Rollins' quote about how tough times present a tremendous opportunity to be heroic. It's a reminder that even in the darkest of moments, we can find strength and purpose in helping others, in contributing to something bigger than ourselves.
So when we feel overwhelmed by our own challenges, maybe the key is to shift our focus outward. Find a way to be of service, connect to something larger than ourselves. And that's where we can tap into this wellspring of strength and resilience.
Exactly. And the sources suggest that this connection to something bigger doesn't have to be grand or heroic. It could be as simple as being there for a friend who's going through a difficult time, or volunteering in your community, or simply focusing on your family.
It's about recognizing that we're all interconnected.
Mm.
Our actions have ripple effects. And even small acts of kindness and compassion can make a big difference.
Beautifully put. And this brings us to the final and perhaps most unexpected element of the roadmap.
Okay.
The sources encourage us to meditate on our mortality.
Wow, now that's a deep dive. Memento mori, right? Remember you will die. But I have to admit, it seems counterintuitive. How can contemplating our own mortality possibly be helpful in overcoming obstacles?
It might seem paradoxical, but the sources suggest that meditating on our mortality can actually be a source of profound liberation.
Okay, I'm intrigued. Tell me more. How does thinking about death help us live better?
One of the sources recounts the story of Michel de Montaigne, the French philosopher. He had this near-death experience that completely shifted his perspective. He realized that death wasn't something to be feared, it was something to be embraced. And it gave him this newfound appreciation for life, this sense of urgency to live fully and meaningfully.
It's like that saying, when a man knows he's to be hanged in a fortnight, it concentrates his mind wonderfully.
Precisely. It's about recognizing the preciousness of time, the importance of living intentionally. By contemplating our own mortality, we gain a much clearer sense of what truly matters and what we want to accomplish with our limited time on this earth.
So it's not about being morbid or dwelling on death, but about using it as a catalyst for living a more meaningful life. To break free from those trivial worries that consume so much of our energy and attention, and to focus on what truly matters.
Exactly. And that shift in perspective can be incredibly empowering. It allows us to approach our challenges with a renewed sense of purpose and urgency, knowing that our time is precious and that every moment counts. It's about turning that fear of death into a powerful motivator for living fully and without regret.
Yeah, thinking about our own mortality really puts things in perspective, doesn't it? It makes you realize that so many of the things that we stress about are ultimately insignificant in the grand scheme of things.
Hmm. It's a powerful reminder to focus on what truly matters, our relationships, our values, our contributions to the world. And that brings us to another crucial insight from the sources, this understanding that we're not alone in our struggles.
That's such a comforting thought, you know? It's easy to feel isolated when we're going through a tough time, but remembering that others have faced similar, maybe even worse challenges and have come out the other side can be so reassuring.
Yeah, and the sources offer some pretty compelling examples of this. We've already discussed James Stockdale and his fellow POWs, finding strength in their shared experience. But there's another story that really struck me. Abraham Lincoln's lifelong battle with depression.
Wow, I had no idea.
Mm.
He always projected such strength and resilience, especially during the Civil War. It's hard to imagine him struggling with something as debilitating as depression.
It's a testament to his character that he was able to lead a nation through such a tumultuous period while grappling with his own inner demons.
Hmm.
And the sources suggest that his personal struggles actually deepened his empathy and compassion, making him a more effective leader.
So it wasn't despite his struggles, but because of them,
Hmm.
that he was able to connect with people on such a deep level and inspire them to persevere through one of the darkest chapters in American history.
That's a powerful insight. And it underscores this idea that our wounds can actually become sources of wisdom and strength. It's not about denying or suppressing our pain. It's about finding a way to integrate it, to learn from it, and even to use it to help others that are going through similar challenges.
Turning our wounds into wisdom, that's a beautiful way to put it. So we've talked about accepting the reality of obstacles, mentally preparing for them, building our inner strength, loving our fate, persevering, finding strength in something larger than ourselves, and meditating on our mortality.
Mhm.
What other practical strategies do the sources offer for actually navigating these challenges?
One that really stands out is the importance of mindfulness, being fully present in the current moment without dwelling on the past or worrying about the future.
Yeah, mindfulness seems to be everywhere these days. But I have to admit, I still don't fully grasp how it can actually help us deal with obstacles.
Well, think about it this way. When we're constantly ruminating about past mistakes or anxiously anticipating future problems, we're not fully engaging with the present moment. We're essentially missing out on life as it's happening.
Hmm.
And that can make it much harder to actually cope with challenges when they arise.
So mindfulness is about training our attention to stay focused on the here and now,
Exactly.
to observe our thoughts and feelings without judgment, and to approach each moment with a sense of openness and curiosity.
That's a great way to describe it. And the sources suggest that by cultivating mindfulness, we can become more aware of our habitual reactions to stress, to difficulty. And this awareness allows us to choose more skillful responses rather than simply reacting on autopilot.
So instead of getting swept away by our emotions, we can create a space between the stimulus and our response.
Hmm.
And that space allows us to pause, to reflect, and to choose a course of action that's aligned with our values, our goals.
Exactly. And the sources offer another really powerful strategy for navigating challenges: self-reflection. Taking the time to step back from a situation, examine our thoughts and feelings, and consider different perspectives.
It sounds like a mental inventory. Taking stock of our inner resources, and maybe even identifying any potential blind spots or limiting beliefs that might be holding us back.
That's a great analogy. And the sources suggest that journaling can be a valuable tool for self-reflection.
Okay.
It allows us to process our experiences,
Mm.
to identify patterns in our thinking, our behavior, to gain clarity on our values and our goals.
It's like having a conversation with yourself on paper, a way to get to know yourself better, and to understand how you tend to react to different situations.
Yes. And by regularly engaging in this self-reflection, we become more aware of our strengths, our weaknesses, our triggers, our tendencies. This self-awareness then allows us to respond to challenges with more intention and more skill.
So we're not just reacting blindly, we're making conscious choices
Right.
based on a deeper understanding of ourselves and the situation at hand. Sounds like self-reflection is all about taking ownership of our experience.
You've hit the nail on the head. It's about recognizing that we actually have a choice in how we respond to life's challenges. We can choose to be reactive, blaming others or circumstances for our misfortune, or we can choose to be proactive, taking responsibility for our own thoughts, feelings, and actions.
That reminds me of that Viktor Frankl quote. Between stimulus and response, there is a space. In that space is our power to choose our response. In our response lies our growth and our freedom.
That's a powerful quote, and it perfectly captures the essence of this idea. By taking ownership of our responses, we reclaim our power, our agency, even in the face of difficult circumstances.
So we're not just victims of circumstance, we're active participants in shaping our own experience.
Yep.
We have the power to choose how we respond, how we interpret events, and how we move forward.
Precisely. And that brings us to another really crucial element of this roadmap, the power of perspective.
Okay, I'm intrigued. How does perspective help us to overcome obstacles?
Well, the sources suggest that our perception of an obstacle can often be more challenging than the obstacle itself. It's like that saying, it's not the load that breaks you down, it's the way you carry it.
So two people can face the same obstacle,
Mm-hmm.
but their experience of it will be completely different depending on their perspective.
Exactly. And the sources offer several techniques for shifting our perspective, for seeing things in a new light. One is to practice gratitude, to intentionally focus on the good things in our lives, even when we're facing difficulties.
Yeah, it's easy to get caught up in the negativity, to focus on what's wrong, what's missing. But actively seeking out things to be grateful for can be such a powerful antidote to that negativity.
Absolutely. It shifts our attention away from what we lack and towards what we have.
Mm.
And it can have a profound impact on our mood, our resilience, our ability to cope with challenges.
So gratitude is about training our minds to see the good, the beauty, the blessings, even in the midst of difficulty.
Precisely. And another powerful technique for shifting our perspective is to reframe our challenges as opportunities for growth.
Okay.
Instead of seeing obstacles as roadblocks, we can choose to see them as stepping stones.
It's about flipping that obstacle upside down, right?
Yes.
As we talked about earlier.
Yes.
Finding the lesson, the opportunity, the potential for growth that's hidden within the challenge.
You got it. And the sources suggest that this shifting perspective can be incredibly empowering. Instead of feeling defeated by our obstacles, we can choose to see them as catalysts for transformation.
So it's not about pretending that everything is okay, but it's about choosing to see the potential for growth and learning in every situation.
Exactly. And it's about remembering that we're constantly evolving and that setbacks and challenges are an inevitable part of that process.
Mm.
Embracing that reality can make us more resilient and adaptable.
This is making me think about all the times I've resisted change, clung to the familiar, even when it was no longer serving me. Maybe obstacles are sometimes life's way of nudging us out of our comfort zones and pushing us towards growth.
That's a profound insight. And it highlights the importance of being open to new possibilities, even when they arise from difficult circumstances. The sources also suggest that humor can be a powerful tool for navigating challenges.
Humor. That's an interesting one. I wouldn't have thought to include humor in a toolkit for overcoming obstacles.
And yet the sources suggest that humor can be a powerful antidote to stress and negativity. It can help us to diffuse tension, to cope with difficult situations, and to maintain a sense of perspective.
It's like that saying, laughter is the best medicine.
Exactly. And remember the story of Jack Johnson, the boxer, who faced intense racism and hatred.
Right.
But he used humor to disarm his opponents, to maintain his composure, and ultimately to win the fight.
So even in the midst of serious challenges, there's still room for laughter, for finding the absurdity, for not taking ourselves too seriously.
Yeah. Yes. And the sources suggest that humor can be especially helpful in connecting with others, building relationships, and creating a more positive and supportive environment. It's a reminder that even in the darkest of times, there's still light to be found.
Okay, we've covered a lot of ground here. Acceptance, mindfulness, self-reflection, taking ownership, the power of perspective, and even the importance of humor. But I'm noticing a theme running through all of these strategies. It's about taking an active role in shaping our own experience rather than passively accepting whatever life throws our way.
That's a brilliant observation. And it brings us to another important aspect of this roadmap, the role of leadership in navigating challenges.
That's an interesting connection. I usually think of leadership in terms of guiding others, but you're suggesting it's also about leading ourselves through difficult times.
Exactly. The sources highlight several examples of leaders who embodied these principles of resilience and perseverance.
We already talked about James Stockdale and his leadership in the POW camp. And of course, Abraham Lincoln leading a nation through civil war while battling his own inner demons.
Yes. And the sources also point to Marcus Aurelius, the Roman emperor and Stoic philosopher.
Hmm.
He faced a rebellion led by one of his closest generals. But instead of reacting with rage or vengeance, he chose forgiveness and understanding.
Hmm.
He led by example, demonstrating the power of compassion and self-control, even in the face of betrayal.
Yeah, his actions spoke volumes about his character and his commitment to living by his principles. And it's a powerful reminder that leadership isn't just about having a title or a position of authority. It's about setting an example, inspiring others through our actions, creating a culture of resilience and support.
You've summed it up beautifully. And the sources suggest that one of the most effective ways to lead is by example, by embodying the principles we've been discussing: courage, resilience, perseverance, compassion. We can inspire others to do the same.
It's about remembering that our actions have ripple effects. We can choose to contribute to the negativity and the chaos of the world, or we can choose to be a force for good, for understanding, for compassion. And that starts with leading ourselves.
Absolutely. And it's about creating a culture of support and encouragement where people feel safe to take risks, to learn from their mistakes, and to grow from their challenges.
So leadership in this context is about creating the conditions for growth and resilience, both for ourselves and for those around us.
Precisely. And it's about remembering that we're all in this together. We all face challenges, we all make mistakes, and we all need support along the way.
This has been such an incredibly rich and insightful deep dive. I feel like I have a whole new framework for understanding and navigating the obstacles that life inevitably throws our way. But I have to admit, it can also feel a bit overwhelming. Where do we even begin to apply all of this wisdom in our own lives?
That's a great question. And the sources offer some encouraging advice. They remind us that it's a process, it's a journey, not a destination. We don't have to master all of these principles overnight. We can start by focusing on one or two that resonate with us and gradually incorporate others over time.
It's like building that inner citadel, right? Brick by brick.
Yes. And the sources remind us that we gather strength as we go. Every obstacle we overcome, every challenge we face makes us stronger and more resilient.
So it's not about being perfect. It's about showing up, trying our best, and learning along the way.
Exactly. And the beauty of this philosophy is that it's applicable to everyone regardless of their circumstances. Whether we're facing these major life challenges or simply navigating the everyday ups and downs, these principles can help us to live more fulfilling and meaningful lives.
This has been such an incredible exploration. We've covered so much ground, and I'm sure there's even more to uncover.
I agree, there's still so much more to explore. But perhaps it's time to take a pause and let all of this wisdom sink in.
I think that's a great idea. We'll be back after a short break to wrap up this fascinating deep dive. Welcome back to the deep dive. It's amazing how much ground we've covered. From ancient Stoic wisdom to modern-day leadership principles, we've really been exploring this idea of turning obstacles upside down, right?
It's been quite a journey. And I think there's one more powerful concept from the sources that can help us kind of solidify this whole flipping obstacles idea. It's something we touched on earlier, amor fati, or love of fate.
Yeah, I remember those stories about Thomas Edison embracing the fire at his factory and Jack Johnson, using his opponent's negativity to fuel his own strength. But I'm still kind of wrestling with this. How can we truly love everything that happens to us, especially the difficult stuff, the painful stuff? Is that even realistic?
Yeah, it's a profound question and one that has really resonated throughout history. The sources suggest that it's not about denying the reality of suffering or pretending that everything is always rosy. It's about accepting what is, including the difficult things, and finding a way to make peace with it.
So it's not about enjoying the bad stuff or even liking it, but about finding a way to accept it, to integrate it into our lives, and maybe even find meaning in it.
You've captured it. The sources suggest that by embracing amor fati, we can cultivate a sense of serenity, acceptance, even in the face of adversity. It's about letting go of that need to control everything and surrendering to the flow of life.
I'm sensing a theme here. This idea of acceptance keeps coming up, right? Accepting what we can't control, accepting our mortality, accepting even the difficult parts of our fate. It's like we're learning to dance with life even when the music is a little unpredictable.
What a beautiful analogy. And the sources offer some guidance on how to actually cultivate this love of fate even when life throws us those curveballs. One key idea is remembering that everything is interconnected. Even the seemingly negative events can ultimately lead to something positive. They can teach us valuable lessons, force us to grow, and even open up new opportunities we never could have imagined.
It's like that saying, every cloud has a silver lining. Or maybe even, the obstacle is the way. What appears to be a setback might actually be a redirection, a chance to course correct and find a better path.
Exactly. Another suggestion from the sources is to focus on what we can control, which is primarily our own thoughts and actions. Instead of dwelling on the things we can't change, we can choose to respond in a way that aligns with our values and our goals.
So even when the world feels chaotic and unpredictable, we can still find that sense of agency, right? By focusing on our own inner compass, by choosing how we respond to the circumstances, rather than letting our circumstances dictate our reactions.
Precisely. And that reminds me of the Stoic emphasis on virtue as the ultimate good. It's not about external achievements or possessions, but about cultivating inner strength, wisdom, and goodness. And that's something that no external obstacle can ever take away from us.
So even when everything else seems to be falling apart, we can still find solace and strength in our own character, in our commitment to living a virtuous life.
Absolutely. And the sources suggest that by focusing on virtue, we can find meaning and purpose even in the most challenging of circumstances. It's about remembering what truly matters, aligning our actions with our values, and striving to be the best versions of ourselves.
As we've been talking about all these different ways to flip obstacles upside down, something has been clicking for me. It's like we've been assembling a toolkit, not just for surviving difficult times, but for actually thriving in the face of them.
That's a brilliant way to put it. And the tools in this toolkit, acceptance, mindfulness, self-reflection, finding purpose, connecting with something larger than ourselves, even humor. These are all things we can practice and cultivate even when we're not in the midst of a crisis.
So it's not about waiting for an obstacle to appear before we start using these tools. It's about incorporating them into our daily lives so that we're always prepared to face whatever comes our way.
Exactly. And the beauty of this whole approach is that it's not about achieving some perfect state of being. It's about continuous growth, about learning and adapting as we go, about embracing the journey with all of its ups and downs.
This has been such an incredible deep dive. I feel like I have a whole new perspective on obstacles and a renewed sense of hope and optimism even in the face of uncertainty.
Well, it's been a true pleasure exploring these ideas with you. And remember, the wisdom we've uncovered isn't just for times of crisis, it's for everyday life. It's about finding meaning and purpose in our struggles, cultivating resilience and inner strength, and embracing the fullness of life, both the joys and the sorrows.
Thank you so much for joining us on this incredible journey. And to everyone listening, remember, the obstacle is the way. Keep flipping those obstacles upside down, keep learning and growing, and keep diving deep into the wisdom that life has to offer.